What's up guys, this is Anime Crossover. I'm back with a new episode of What If Naruto Was the King of Chaos Part 7, and if you did enjoy the video, consider a like, and if you my channel and like my content, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more crossover fictions. Now let's begin this new video.
Chapter 30. Freya, third point of view. She couldn't get enough of his brilliant soul once she first saw it. Every moment of her days was spent following him around with her eyes wherever he went. His soul's lovely silvery light shone so brightly that it was transparent. It made so many grand promises and gave so many glimpses of a future of unprecedented, unthinkable power. She would take her sweet time basking in the intensity of that flame whenever she was as near to him as she was now. Being near to him as seer had given her a better understanding of his personality. It seems that the intensities at which it burned relied on the emotions he was experiencing. While he was still, it was like a mild flame that licked the walls of his vessel. When he was angry or in a fight, the fire would roar with the intensity of a beast, making his soul burn so brightly that it nearly blinded her. And then, when he was down in the dumps, when he was depressed, the flame would fade down to a few embers spitting out a few sparks. That was one sight she was not pleased to see. But the quality of this flame spoke of more than just concealed strength and potential. It also talked of a kind of righteousness and grandeur found only in a specific type of spirit. The heart of a hero. And if there was one thing she adored above all others, it was a hero. She'd spent decades collecting hero souls, yet this was the most similar to the souls of the heroes of old. And that was the one soul she had overlooked. There wasn't much that could be done about it just now. She'd taken her time looking through the other things she'd observed when she first set eyes on him. His blade, disguised in his beautiful cane, emitted spiritual force as the souls of countless hero-type mortals hummed inside in harmony. Using the souls within, the sword seemed to maintain its own light. The only time anything would alter was when the boy fought. Only then did the blade illuminate to match the intensity of the boy's soul's brilliance. In fact, when she compared them, they appeared to be identical, as though he was destined to join the others someday. The weapon was more than it appeared. While she wished she could witness it for herself, a visceral sensation inside her told her that it couldn't happen, as if the blade belonged only to him. This mattered the least because it paled in comparison to the other issues she'd come to explore. The enormous wellspring of power that existed in the lowest depths of the boy's psyche, as if it acted as fuel, proceeded to swirl the two colors together in harmony. A combination of dark and light. The light was strong and intensely blue on the edges. Its beauty and shine made her heart and stomach flutter with delight. The darkness was black in the center, with purple wisps floating around it, and it made her sick to her stomach. Nonetheless, she couldn't get enough of both feelings. Something about it drew her attention. The boy appeared to be aware of it. She could see him drawing from his own power as he fought, but only when he did something like cure himself or take that dark form of his could he draw on that strange force. The more she looked at it, the more she suspected it was something strange about the youngster, as if it was not originally a part of him. Her convictions were reinforced when she observed the boy in a depressed state. The brightness and darkness combined to create another type of light, one that was dazzling white, similar to the boy's flame. Its nature was chaotic was the only term she could think of. Despite its appearance as a bright dazzling light, it lacked the same properties as the previous light, yet it also possessed them. Even though the darkness appeared to be gone, she could still detect it in the new light but couldn't see it. It's safe to say she was perplexed. What happened next, though, reaffirmed her beliefs. The new light strokingly moved out from beneath the flame and gently stroked the boy's soul. As in a mother, patting a child's back or giving it a warm cuddle. And, judging by how the youngster sighs forlornly and the light in his spirit begins to burn a bit brighter again, he appears to be comforted. This proved to her once and for all what she had suspected. The source of strength was a whole separate creature. It was acting as a spirit, utilizing the boy's body and soul as a vessel. Except this wasn't any spirit she'd ever seen before. It was far too powerful to be a normal spirit, yet she couldn't think of anything else to call it. With power and magic far beyond his level, and being accompanied by souls that seemed heroic in nature in his sword and some sort of spirit-like creature that inhabited him, this youngster seemed to share more and more similarities with the heroes of old. And all the other morons around her had no notion she was surrounded by such a magnificent, incredible existence. There was no way of knowing that this youngster was destined for glory unseen in almost 1,000 years. She approached him slowly, taking in the kaleidoscope of amazement that his mere being emanated. She'd also been watching how he effortlessly manipulated the water in his glass rather than drinking it, twisting and molding it into different forms. Before calling out to him, she had a glimpse of the silhouette of a strange woman. "And what could you possibly be thinking so deeply about, young man?" she said, her voice enchanting practically everyone who heard it. The boy turned immediately in her direction, and she was once again impressed when the child's latent powers were shown. Without his knowledge, the water form of the woman morphed back into her image, a perfect reproduction of herself as she was now. This reinforced another of her suspicions. Even while blindfolded, the youngster could see. However, how he had vision remained a mystery. But such a detailed sculpture could only be created if a human could see her clearly as day. As a result, he would undoubtedly feel the same way others did when they saw her for the first time. But, much to her surprise, despite the fact that he appeared to see her, he looked aside from her as if she didn't bother him at all. He stood up to my attractiveness by himself. She was taken aback. There were few, if any, mortals who could muster the willpower to look away from her, let alone do it simply. Even if he couldn't see her, the sound of her voice was enough to captivate the senses of someone hearing her for the first time. Although she felt Ottar was to fault because the youngster had followed her. Fear made the child's body rigid, and her stunning water figurine froze into ice. His horror was palpable, even to her. But, once again, the boy defied expectations. Grown adventurers, men of a higher level than the boy and of greater age, cowered in the face of Ottar's presence. But the youngster seemed to shove his terror aside, standing firm and indignant against the monster she referred to as her captain. Ottar's opinion of Boaz was expressed by a slight quiver at the corner of his mouth that only she had expertise catching. Naruto made an impression on him. "I believe we haven't met before," Loki's new offspring stated to them, his voice firm and devoid of emotion. "Yes. Exceptionally unique." In general, those closest to the action watched with bated breath, largely amused to see Naruto, who appeared so little and frail, stand up to Ottar, the most famous, renowned, and revered adventurer in Orario at the time. Freya grinned and moved closer to the boy. She leaned in, pushing her face up against the boy's face. But he remained unconcerned. She grinned before lowering her gaze to the ice statue in his grasp. She gently took it from his grasp and held it aloft, admiring the wonderful work of art, taking in every detail. "You're very talented, aren't you?" she asked gently, her smile remaining on her face. "You wouldn't mind if I take this, do you? I'll be glad to pay for it." "What would be the point? It'll just probably melt soon enough." Except for Ottar and Naruto, she giggled, her laugh sounding like tinkering chimes that enthralled everyone around her. "But that's the value of it, my dear, to enjoy it while it lasted." "Is that the attitude you approach everything else in your life with?" Naruto questioned with a smirk. She did, however, hum in. "Well, no, I am on the lookout for something that will bring me everlasting happiness, just like everyone else. I just have not yet found it." Naruto looked at her with a calm expression before groaning and waving it away. "You can take it. You don't need to pay me for it." "Thank you," she whispered gently, her eyes twinkling at him. "I hope I won't trouble you in the future if I'd like a few more." "Yeah, don't mention it. You still haven't told me who you are." "I'd think you'd know who we are, but very well," she said, holding out the figurine for Ottar to take. She put her hand to her chest and did a cute little curtsy when he finished. "I am Freya, the patron of the Freya familia. And beside me waving here is Ottar, my captain." Naruto returned to their prior stare contest as Ottar gestured in his direction. "So you are the one who is considered the strongest of our generation, Mr. Ottar," Naruto stated solemnly. "Indeed," Ottar responded with equal stoniness in his voice. The two exchanged another stare before Naruto began again. "Then you are the threshold, the wall which I must climb and which I shall ascend past," Naruto went on to say. Everyone in the area fell silent as they gaped at his audacity. They would have laughed if the youngster hadn't uttered it with such certainty and deathly seriousness. "Is that so?" Ottar inquired, his voice devoid of amusement. Everyone else would have laughed if he had, but it appeared like Boaz was taking this matter seriously. "And you believe that you can do it?" "I will surpass you," Naruto declared, his head held high. "Mark my words, I've only just begun, but one day Ottar." "One day," Naruto said, tilting his head forward to emphasize his pledge. Ottar continued to stare at him before closing his eyes and nodded. "I eagerly anticipate the day you do then, young one." That's what Ottar said. The guests glanced at this strange scene before whispering to one another. That kid has got some on him, you know. And the Freya Familia captain actually acknowledged it. Who is that ballsy little lad? You mean you don't know? Haven't you been keeping in touch with the rumors lately? No, why? You retard. That's Loki's new kid that broke the level up record from 1 to 2 in a day. Wait. That's him. So maybe there is something there after all. Forget that. Why is Freya paying such attention to him? It should be me. It's why I come to these stupid parties after all. You need a new hobby, buddy. Naruto rolled his eyes when he overheard people gossiping about him behind his back. He'd become used to it by now. Freya only shook her head before turning to face him. You haven't introduced yourself yet, young man. Now that we've told you our names, could you tell us yours? Alright. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, he said, bowing as Reveria had taught him. I am the newest member of Lady Loki's Familia. And as you've probably heard from the not-so-subtle conversation around us, he had a stern expression on his face. They whipped their heads away and pretended to do something else. I am the new record breaker. Is that true? That is simply mesmerizing, Freya exclaimed. She leaned in again and softly touched his cheeks, bringing her face so close to his that he could feel her breath on his lips. Tell me, Naruto, how did you manage to accomplish something so monumental? Her eyes shone with a purple radiance. In general. Several seconds passed as Freya stared carefully at his blindfold, wishing she could see how his eyes appeared and whether or not he could see hers. She kept her charm on, putting all of her energy into it as she could on a single person. Everyone was waiting for the outcome of what was going on with bated breath. No one could see her face because of the angle at which the two were positioned. Those who knew her, on the other hand, were well aware of her intentions. Naruto raised an eyebrow after a few more seconds. Are those glowing eyes meant to do something or what? Freya was thrown for a loop, her mouth slightly agape as she realized the charm had no impact on him. At the very least, she knew he could see with those eyes behind his blindfold if he could tell hers were blazing. But if he could see them, he must have fallen to the same effects as everyone else. Yet, right in front of her, in her own face, he simply shrugged it off. Perhaps I should wait a little longer for the effects to continue, or... Naruto continued, clearly enjoying the look on her face. It reminded me of the time Ishtar learned that her charms had no effect on Bel. However, this was owing to an unintended consequence of an exceptionally rare skill. Naruto had previously mentioned that as the host of Chaos, he experienced adverse effects. One of them was perfect resistance to poison and drunkenness, which explains why he could never get intoxicated and why the abnormal resistance development ability may never be required. Another of those adverse effects was immunity to trances, hypnosis, charms, and, to a lesser extent, illusions. He couldn't be beaten at something Chaos could easily win. He might capture her in a charm if he ripped off the blindfold immediately. Except that this one would alter reality itself in order to make the events of her trance come true. But, obviously, he wasn't going to do that for his own protection. For the time being, he could enjoy the satisfaction of defeating this ambitious woman. That's enough. Yelled Loki from above, leaping over the banister and delivering a heavy smack to Freya's head with her weight. The silver-haired goddess closed her eyes and raised her head in pain, smiling bitterly. Why hello Loki. It's not quite nice to greet someone like that in such a violent manner, you know. You have no shame, do you? Loki charged, pointing a long, pointy finger at her. She quickly leaned down and wrapped her arms around Naruto, pressing her cheek against his. He's mine, Freya, you hear? I was only testing his resolve, Loki dear. There's no reason to get so upset. Testing his resolve. Do you think I was born yesterday? What part of charming him into your submission is testing his resolve? Loki said as she feverishly examined Naruto, lightly smacking him around the face as if attempting to wake him awake. But isn't he supposed to be blind? Wondered one of the partygoers. Stop that. Yelled Naruto, swatting her hands away. I'm fine. It didn't do nothing. Huh? Loki exclaimed in surprise. Freya gave a nod. It's true, Loki. Surprisingly, my charm had no effect on him, she shrugged as she shrugged her shoulders. Loki returned her gaze to her child's face. He said, yep, nothing at all. You sound like someone who's been charmed by her, though, Loki screamed back. The response she received was a fist slamming into her chin, causing her to see stars as she rolled over and onto her back disoriented. Is this enough evidence to show I wasn't affected? Naruto snarled. How many times have I told you not to shout in my face? I was just checking to see if it was you. All part of the plan, Loki responded, remaining on the floor, thumbs up. He murmured, looking away and folding his arms. Loki then rushed into a seat and pointed at Loki. Don't you realize the gravity of the situation? She just tried to charm you. That's how she gets adventurers to love her enough to leave their familia and join hers. Loki shouted before gritting her teeth and growling eerily like a puppy at Freya. Is that so? Naruto mumbled before turning to face Freya. Sorry Lady Freya, but such underhanded methods won't work on me. You'll have to try a little harder if you want my attention that badly. Certainly, Freya responded with a smile that, for some reason, made Naruto uncomfortable. She gave him another look, her eyes glittering, before turning her head to see where Loki was. You better keep your slimy fingers off of him, Freya. Not one dainty little finger. Loki growled, fists clenched. I can't make any promises because your child has just openly challenged me, Loki, Freya said, somewhat laughing. And you know I don't back down from a challenge. Why you, as someone approached their gathering, a cool, serene voice stated, ladies, I believe that's quite enough now. He was a tall man in a white suit with blonde hair. His eyes were sharp and cunning, with a calculating glint in them. A tall girl with ash blonde hair in a gorgeous blue dress trailed behind him, her arms clasped with his. Freya smiled as she said, Why hello Hermes. I didn't know you were back so soon from your trip. Hermes laughed. I highly doubt that, Freya. There isn't much that your eyes miss. Indeed, she answered, her gaze fixed on Naruto. Loki huffed at her before turning to Hermes. I can see you. Yeah, fine, hi, whatever. Just tell her to keep her hands off my Naruto, would you? I could certainly try, but I doubt it would do much good, Hermes said, shaking his head. The girl behind him laughed as well. Hermes then investigated the source of this minor conflict. He saw that the youngster appeared to be quite young, not having even reached puberty based on the shape of his face and the fairness of his complexion. However, it appeared that this would not be the case for long. In another year or so, the youngster might be ready for puberty. The messenger, on the other hand, noticed how the boy's little outfit stretched taut against his physique. Even though he was frail, the child stood guard, ready to battle. Not necessarily as it would happen now, but as if it were a habit. Under the coat, lean muscles rippled, indicating a robust body. This was no average child, to say the least, if rumors were to be believed. Hermes greeted him. Nice to meet you, young man. I am Hermes, the patron god of the Hermes familia. Beside me is my captain Lydia. Lydia was bowing her head. Nice to meet you as well. Naruto Uzumaki, newest recruit of the Loki familia. And, it appears, the most ambitious, Hermes said just loud enough for them to hear. But to reiterate Freya's earlier question, young man, I too would like to know how you accomplished such an amazing feat. Naruto shook his head. I just kept on fighting. No matter how many times I was thrown, crushed, stepped on or punched, I kept on getting back up and dishing out attacks to the best of my ability until I felled the beast like a tree. Nothing more than the usual adventure. Except the usual level 1 newbie adventurer does not challenge a monster Rex on their first dungeon run. Freya went on to say, and yet you somehow prevailed. Listen, you can speculate how I did it all you want. The truth is I myself don't know. I was busy focusing on getting out of there alive if you didn't realize. Naruto honestly had no idea how such a thing had occurred, therefore none of the gods present could detect a falsehood. Hermes sighed, Unfortunate. And here I was hoping that you could give us at least a bit of an insight. Hermes. I asked you to tell her to go away, not join her, Loki cried out. But you cannot blame us, dear. We have children too, and we also would like to know he did it. You cannot fault us for being a little curious, she replied. I can blame you for poaching, you idiot. Hermes chuckled as he said, and the pot calls the kettle black. Excuse me. While this was going on, Naruto gradually backed away from the spectacle, having already lost interest. Arguing was never an enjoyable thing to witness, especially amongst adults who acted like children. This only served to cause him to collide with Ottar's hip, who'd gotten behind him in some way. Naruto glared angrily into the boar man's face. Ottar cocked his head to one of the tables. A word and a drink. This could take a while, the man replied, motioning over to the bickering party. Sure. Why not? Naruto stated bluntly. Could he say no? Only Lydia noticed the two as they walked away from their respective deities. Ottar brought him over to a table with a few of chairs. The table was set with a variety of meals and meat dishes, as well as a bowl of punch. Ottar, like a true gentleman, offered some to Naruto, who politely accepted. Meanwhile, Naruto whistled inside, admiring Ottar's tidy and respectable appearance in that old-fashioned dress with the jewels and frills and studded buttons, when he typically looked like a street brawler without the tattoos. They eat in peace for a few moments until Naruto pondered something as he watched Ottar bite into some pork ribs. Not to be offensive or anything, but that is pig, right? He asks, pointing to the fork Ottar was holding with the rib meat stuck on the end. Yes? Ottar asks, puzzled, as he continued to eat. Wouldn't that count as, maybe a kind of cannibalism? Just wondering, Naruto swiftly added. Ottar took a breather before raising his fork and looked at the meat on his plate. He sat there for a few moments, staring at his food, before lifting his head, a look of mild awareness on his features. Never really considered that, Boaz replied before returning to his meal. You appear to think a little differently than others, don't you, Naruto Uzumaki? Just call me Naruto, King. It gets annoying when people have to say my full name. King? Yeah, King, Naruto said, his face flushed. Isn't that what people call you? Ottar mused. No. But it doesn't sound bad. Anyway, I also wish to know how you did what you did. Come on. I've all read. I just want to understand what you did in those moments when facing down the monster Rex. And while you were traversing the middle floors encountering all those monsters, did they not pose a threat to you at all? Well, no, not really. Most of them were just a whole bunch of weaklings. I only started facing real competition when I began fighting minotaurs. Naruto replied as he raised his arms in surrender. Minotaurs? At that level? Yes. Ottar already knew all of this because he had witnessed the events in his mistress's mirror. He simply wanted to see how the youngster approached the subject. You must have had combat experience beforehand then, if only a minotaur was the point where you started getting serious. I did. But that is a chapter of my life I would not like to revisit, so please refrain from asking anything else. It's very personal. Very well, Ottar replied, peering over his shoulder at the boy as he chewed. You must have some great goal in mind. What? For one so young to consolidate so much strength even before becoming an adventurer, and to delve so deep into the dungeon to a point others would call him mad for doing so, one can only assume that there is something you wish to achieve through all this. Am I correct? Besides power, which is the obvious tool I need, yes, I do have a goal. So power itself is not the goal then? Naruto sighed. No, it is simply the weapon I must use in order to achieve my goal, he explained to his dining companion. You seem to be awfully perceptive yourself, Ottar. I've been doing this for a long time, and you eventually learn some things, Ottar stated as he gulped. I won't bother to ask what it is exactly you're aiming to achieve, but as one adventurer to another, your path will not be easy. Naruto arched her brow. And why exactly are you giving me this pep talk? We may be of the same generation, but there is still so much more for you to learn. The dungeon is not a playground. It is a literal pit of treachery and death with no mercy. Just because you have accomplished so much already, perhaps so easily, do not think it will be the same and you can just power through all the levels. If anything, go in with the expectation that because you accomplished so much on your first run, your journey will be that much more difficult than everyone else's, and that the dungeon will try harder to kill you than your companions. Arrogance is the worst quality an adventurer can have. It endangers them and their familia. I'd say there's plenty of that in yours, Naruto remarked, his tone ironic. Why are you telling me this anyway? I'm not so blind that I do not see the significance of my level up and my potential for my familia. As each other's rivals, I'd expect that you'd want me dead more than anything else. It is because you have that potential that I am telling you this. Whether we are rivals or not, we will leave matters such as that for appropriate times. Powerful adventurers will only ever be a good thing for Orario as we serve as the city's shield against the dungeon. The more we have, the better. Ottar locked his gaze on his. You come to me and boldly claim that you will surpass me. I am warning you that the road is not going to be easy. I have sacrificed much to get this far, and I am not going to let you take my place from me so easily, as I too will strive to get even stronger than this. Things are easier said than done. You must prove to yourself before anyone else that you have what it takes to reach such a high level. That is the reason why I am imparting this wisdom to you. And this has nothing to do with your goddess's desires? Naruto questioned skeptically. Ottar remained silent for a time before exhaling and closing his eyes. These are just my personal feelings. Nothing more, nothing less. The Boaz sipped his last drink of punch before standing up and turning to face the boy. I will be sure to test that resolve of yours as well. The next time we meet, I should hope that you have the power and the skill necessary to back such ambition. Naruto responded, I assure you that you will not be disappointed. I too am well aware of my own limits and the dangers of arrogance and overconfidence, but I never run from a fight. If I must die, I'd rather go down fighting than just rolling over. Then I guess it'll be up to me to teach how to know when to retreat, Ottar replied, nodding. Until then, he said as he turned around to meet his mistress. Later, Naruto murmured, as he was left alone with his thoughts. The party had continued until morning. The majority of the food had been consumed, and the drinks were about to run out. Nobody had opted to depart yet, and because he wasn't interested in meeting other adventurers, he roamed around on his own for the rest of the evening. Loki had spent 2 hours arguing with Freya and Hermes, a steady spitfire of an interchange between the three, largely Loki shrieking, with Freya encouraging her and Hermes trying to quiet them down. The other deities had crowded around it as if it were a display, cheering. Naruto was starting to realize how bored they must have been to find anything like that entertaining. He'd gone about a little after that, sampling different things from different tables and being consistently dissatisfied when the taste was missing. Even the desserts were a letdown, and in his previous life, it was the worst crime a restaurant could perform against him. It wasn't a restaurant, but if you couldn't even make a dessert that wasn't mildly tasteful emptiness, it received a 0-star rating. That's exactly how he spent his evening. Going around each table and rating the food. His stomach was filled by the time it was almost midnight, and he was lounging around waiting for Reveria to arrive with the carriage. Loki had a habit of falling asleep drunkenly at occasions like this, and someone had to come from the manor to take her up. Reveria got the short end of the stick this time. He caught sight of the band on a particularly illuminated side of the room taking a break from their song and possibly leaving their instruments to go refresh themselves as he leaned his head on his palm, his fingers tapping away at the silverware. His gaze was drawn to a piano in the midst of it all. With his curiosity piqued, he lifted his fatigued body, which was still recovering from the battle with Goliath, and walked over to the big instrument. He considered simply healing himself of all pains using healing magic, but decided against it in the hopes that surviving through the suffering might provide him with some bonus stats. Even 1 point was an extra point acquired without having to work hard for it. He sat down on the piano stool and examined what he was working with. As he brushed his fingers over the keys, a few curious eyes followed him. Naruto couldn't recall the last time he'd sat at a table like this. He recalled lovingly the hours he'd spent with his mother, Olivia. In his grandfather's house, she'd regularly played it for him. Although, much to the displeasure of the old gits, it was the way her fingers would dance over the keys and the reassuring lull of her voice that drew him in. And so his fascination with pianos began. He'd opted to play the piano in high school when he studied music. Some of his classmates had teased him a little for bothering to learn how to play such an old instrument, and for not being interested in modern music instead. Those idiots just didn't get how he saw things or what it meant to him. Every time he played one, he remembered his mother, and even though she was far away, the warmth of her eyes filled his heart. And he'd play a lovely music devoted to his mother to no one in particular, to his heart's content. Nothing or anyone else mattered. As he hit the first key, the startling musical sound booming across the room drew everyone's attention to the small kid at the piano, and they turned their quirked brows to him. But he was already caught up in the flood of recollections brought back by the music. His other hand rose and pressed another key, producing a different sound this time. He pressed another, and a new sound entered his ears. Some onlookers turned aside, dismissing it as a child's harmless curiosity. Some people, however, such as Loki, who had not yet become tipsy, and Freya, who had not let him out of her sight the entire time they were celebrating. Naruto gradually became acquainted with the piano, and discovered to his delight, which he hardly recognized as the room vanished and Naruto found himself even smaller than he was now, seated on his mother's knee. As she sung to him, her fingers moved his over the keys, teaching him the different notes. Slowly, a beautiful, musical yet mournful symphony emerged from the piano, capturing everyone's attention once more, this time in astonishment and wonder. Even the band couldn't believe what they were hearing because it was far more beautiful than anything else they had ever heard. and they'd been playing music all around town. Feeling my way through the darkness, the tiny boy spoke in hushed tones. Despite the fact that it was quiet, it strangely filled the room as everyone stopped chatting to listen to his young voice singing with such astonishing beauty. But Naruto paid no attention because he was deaf even to stillness. He felt overcome with passion, his emotions leaking into his voice as he savored the opportunity to see his mother again. Guided by a beating heart, I can't tell where the journey will end. But I know where to start. Loki realized, with a sudden and unexpected sting in her heart, that Naruto actually sounded more like a normal child, brimming with emotion, than he had in the entire time he'd been with her. And it caused her some distress for some reason. She tossed the wine glass and moved down the stairs toward him as he continued to sing. They tell me I'm too young to understand. They say I'm caught up in a dream. Well, life will pass me by if I don't open up my eyes. Well, that's fine by me. Naruto began to shake his body as he sang, gently swaying from side to side as his hands sped over the keys. If only he knew how much attention he was drawing to himself, yet he was once again unaware. Even thread was abandoned as he became engrossed in a song dear to him and his true mother. So wake me up when it's all over, when I'm wiser and I'm older. All this time I was finding myself, and I had no idea I was lost. So wake me up when it's all over, when I'm wiser and I'm older. All this time I was finding myself, and I had no idea I was lost. Every person in the room had gathered around the performance by this point. Deities, aristocrats, and adventurers all watched in awe and despair as the mysterious melody struck them deeply in ways that music had never done before. As the raw passion in the small boy's voice struck them, some ladies dried their eyes with handkerchiefs. Even the stoic Ottar, who stood with Freya at the front, was taken away at how someone of Naruto's character could do something like this. Naruto's regard for the boy grew a little more as he shed his adventurer persona and, for the first time in this life that he didn't desire, he was precisely what he appeared to be, a child. Reveria had arrived much earlier than everyone else and had been waiting by the door in full awe as she recognized who was playing music and sang with such grace that she had surpassed the elves back home who were known for the beauty of their vocals. I tried carrying the weight of the world, but I only have 2 hands, hope I get the chance to travel the world, but I don't have any plans, wish that I could stay forever this young, not afraid to close my eyes, life's a game made for everyone, and love is a prize. Freya was surprised to find one of her eyes watering at this verse. She slowly reached up to her eye and dragged out a tear. She watched in astonishment as the tear rolled down the tip of her finger, fell to the floor, and splashed. So wake me up when it's all over, when I'm wiser and I'm older. All this time I was finding myself, and I had no idea I was lost. So wake me up when it's all over, when I'm wiser and I'm older. All this time I was finding myself, and I had no idea I was lost. The lovely piano music continued as Naruto played his favorite song again and again, his voice increasing softer as he neared the end. When he was done, his voice was barely above a loud whisper. Nonetheless, it was heard. Slowly, he returned to reality to the sound of his audience's muted but ardent applause, some openly crying while others rejoiced. But because everyone knew what kind of tone the song had created in the room, no one went overboard. Naruto noticed this but didn't even turn his head to greet them. He felt neither embarrassed nor proud of what he'd done now. He had no idea what this would mean for him in the long run. He was unconcerned. All he could think about was the sadness and loneliness he felt every time he realized how far he was from home, from his mother's warm hug. After a few uncertain moments, he recognized 2 green-clad arms slowly wrapping around his waist and a chin resting on his head. He sat in the warm embrace, trying to figure out who this was. The aroma of Reveria's perfume finally registered with him. She began mumbling something to him in soft tones, but he was too overtaken with emotion to understand what she was saying. He did nothing more than spin around on the stool and bury his face between her neck and her shoulder, his shoulders and back quivering as he silently sobbed into her robes. Nobody said anything. No matter how strong or mature he is for his age, at the end of the day, he is still a child. Reveria stated this as she stroked the sleeping boy's face with her fingertips. They were riding the carriage back home down the main route. The child had wept himself to sleep in Reveria's arms and was now sprawled across the chairs, his head in the elf's lap as she comforted him. His blindfold had soaked through with his tears in her other hand, and he rested on her leg, his face fully exposed. Loki looked at him, taking in his entire appearance. He had obviously been strolling about with a blindfold on for quite some time. The skin around his eyes was a few shades lighter than the rest of his face, and it was the exact form of the blindfold. Taking it off displayed his entire face for the two women to admire. It occurred to them how much more of a child he appeared to be today, and it served to remind them of that fact. Naruto held himself with a sense of pride, authority, and humility that belonged to an adult who had been through painful experiences in life and had found a way to cope with the trauma. The senior explorers recognized this behavior because they had gone through a similar phase. He really does look adorable without the stupid thing on. Loki slumped forward, her head resting in her hands. I'm tempted to open his eyes and see what color they are. She said this while extending a finger towards his face. Reveria slapped her hand away fiercely. Ow. Why, Mama? Quiet. You'll startle him. Reveria said dangerously, rubbing his cheek. He obviously hasn't shown us for good reason. If you did that, you'd be breaching his faith in us, not to mention invading his personal space. Loki sighed. You say. You're making the most of every opportunity to stroke his adorable face. Reveria smirked as she did it again to irritate the redhead even more. Indeed. And I'm loving every minute of it. Loki flopped backwards, her arms curled in frustration. She remained silent for a time before giving them each a glance and a small smile. You've grown quite attached to him, Reveria, she stated. You know, it's a little warmer. And rare in such a short period of time. Reveria murmured as she stopped moving her hands. I suppose it's partially because I feel responsible for what happened between him and Goliath. But? Loki inquired knowingly. I'm not sure. Something in me appears to be drawn to him. It extends beyond his remarkable talent and foreign magic. I feel compelled to keep an eye out for him. And you wonder why we call you Mama Elf. Reveria fixed her gaze on her. Still though, who knew he had such a good voice? I know. That was certainly unexpected. Reveria frowned at him. I've never heard anyone sing a song with such sadness in their voice, and yet it was that sadness that made the song so beautiful. What about the piano? Even my father's minstrels would struggle to compete with such a tune. I wonder what the meaning was behind it though. Loki pondered. What compelled him to sing such a thing? He didn't say anything all night. Clearly, it has something to do with his life before he came to us. I've already stressed this to Finn, and I'll do the same with you. Don't inquire. Allow him to come to us. Yes. I know. Loki lamentedly glanced at the sleeping boy. But whatever baggage he carries, it has to be a lot. I can't help but be concerned since he is my child. Naruto's point of view. I was resting down on something that was neither soft nor hard. But whatever it was strangely soothing. As a startling flash of light flooded my vision, I nearly screamed as I opened my eyes. It took some time for me to acclimatize, but I was soon able to open my eyes entirely. And I was met with an all-time cliché. Simply put, I was in a white abyss. There was virtually nothing nearby. It appeared to be one large space with all white floors, walls, and ceiling. Except I couldn't identify any corners, edges, or places where the walls touched the floor. I couldn't really fathom where I was at the time. But then it occurred to me that my eyes were open. As in, I was seeing things with my own eyes and didn't feel the pressure of chaos pouring out of my body. I reached up to my face, searching for the blindfold but coming up empty-handed. When I felt a weight on my hip, I looked down and saw Excalibur sheathed at my hip. However, it was not in the form of my cane as normal. No, it was in its original shape this time, the form it had taken when I first gripped it, when it was known as Excalibur. Feeling as perplexed as ever, I raised it to eye level and thoroughly examined it, hoping to gain some insight into what was going on. As I was doing so, I noticed something over the blade's edge. A silhouette, a blazing bright form of a person standing around 20 feet distant, stood out. I immediately put Excalibur on guard, puzzled as to why none of my detection fields picked them up. I approached them cautiously, hoping to make out any distinguishing features. As I got closer, I saw that, despite the fact that I could only see the shape of it and nothing else, it had its back to me. This inspired me to move in closer. I could see what I was looking at a little better when I was a few feet away. The person was made of a bright light, and their presence was strange. It was neither hostile nor friendly, but it appeared to be both at the same time. Even when it turned around and peered at you with a non-existent face, it was difficult to discern if it was a man or a woman. We both stood there looking each other up and down, or so it seemed to me. Something nagged in the back of my head, as though I knew this person, if it was a person at all. The answer came to me after much thought and going through every memory I'd ever had. I know you. As I dropped my sword, I said. The figure appeared to be cocking its head inquisitively. Your name is Chaos. The power that resides within me. The apparition seemed to nod to me. Why have you brought me here? I inquired. But I received no response. Chaos simply stood there, staring at me. I remained there dumbfounded, expecting it to respond in some way despite the fact that I couldn't see its mouth. Then it did something bizarre. It took a few steps closer till it was directly in front of me. It towered above my childlike physique in its mature shape. It cupped my face compassionately as it slowly rose its hands. The instinct to lean away did not arise throughout this time. I leant into the touch unconsciously for reasons I couldn't describe. The hands touching my face were made of something other than flesh. In fact, despite feeling the entity's hands pressing against my cheeks, I couldn't feel them. I was overcome with a strong sensation of familiarity and ease. I closed my eyes, savoring the sensation before it vanished. I instantly reopened my eyes to find myself standing on a balcony overlooking a familiar big valley. Even though I have moved on from your tutelage, you still decide to bother me. As I turned around to face another familiar sight, I muttered grimly. Hamura sat at his favorite table in his favorite place, drinking tea with that annoying expression on his face. I just wanted to check in on you. See how you fit into the adventurer's life and everything. I stood there for a few moments, staring at him, before giving in and sitting across from him in a chair that I knew would appear behind me. Hamura poured me a cup of tea and sat back down. I took my time sipping, enjoying the pleasant flavor, which was one of the few things I loved about Valorant. I see you've already gotten to level 2. I must say, it's quite stunning. Even I wasn't expecting it to happen that quickly, but hey. Life is full of unexpected twists and turns. No thanks to you. I responded. And I'm pretty sure it's related to the one power you didn't tell me about. Would you like to tell me what it is now? Nope. Why? First, you didn't ask the right question. Second, I want you to solve it on your own. In all honesty, the answer is rather obvious. You're simply not using your head or your powers appropriately. Am I not using my brain? Have you any clue how much it's been consuming me? Everyone down there undoubtedly thinks I'm a weirdo now. Definitely. You really are not helpful. Hamura shook his head and drank his tea quietly. With a twinkle in his eye, he gazed up at me. I have to say, Naruto, I had no idea you could sing that well. It came as a complete surprise to me. It wasn't meant to happen. I muttered something. I have no idea what happened. I just touched a blasted piano key and then I was playing like I was performing for the Queen of England without even realizing it. It happens to people who are emotionally immersed in music on occasion. I believe that was a part of yourself that you forgot about, but when you discovered it again, you couldn't help but reconnect with it. And whose fault would that be? I was enraged. Hamura just gave me a sad expression. I folded my arms and turned away, unable to take the sight of his face. We sat for a few moments before I sighed. Master, why did you send me there? Is it merely for your entertainment, or is there something else going on? Hamura set his cup down and folded his palms on the table. Partially, yes. However, for the most part, no, you definitely have a real purpose there. And what would that be? He gave me a friendly smile. To be the hero that the world actually needs. I glanced at him, violently surprised, before responding in a menacing tone. As I said before, Hamura, I didn't go there to be a hero. I'm simply there to master the power you've given me and tear myself back home. And yet you appear to have been enjoying yourself while you're there. Huh. Don't say that you don't enjoy the company of the cute little Ice Wallenstein. I averted my gaze from him. What are you insinuating? Dangerously, I said. He shook his head. It doesn't matter. What I'm really trying to say is that even if you don't want to be a hero, you will be. So you have left me choiceless again. No, he responded. I am not the one who has chosen you as a hero. Then who did? Not who, but what, and, to answer your question, it's that object right there. He said this while pointing to Excalibur. I lifted the big blade and stared at it, perplexed. What about the sword? What does that have to do with anything? You are aware that the holy sword cannot be wielded by just anybody. To resist it, one must be worthy enough to be selected. Yes. But it was you who gave it to me. True. The sword, on the other hand, did not obey you because I instructed it to. It picked you to be its master of its own accord. You know what I mean. Before it came over me, I wrinkled my brows in intense thought. He who is chosen by Excalibur is destined to become a hero, I muttered. And you are the king of chaos. You are destined to be the best of all, Hamura said. Isn't that exciting? I almost nodded in awe, but I shook my head violently. No Belle's dream, not mine, is to be a hero. I don't care what happens to that world. The only thing I care about is getting back to my mother, and that is all. Hamura gave me a gloomy expression. Don't lie to yourself. He shouted something to me in a tone I'd never heard before, and it stunned me into stillness. He went on to say more. Perhaps you may not care for them now, but you will find that you shall in the future. Why? I never asked for this life. I was not looking forward to taking on this job. How could I love something that was imposed upon me? You don't get it now, Naruto. However, you will in the future. When you fight beside someone, mutually protecting and willing to lose your lives for them, you can't help but care for them. I couldn't think of anything to say. I was simply exhausted by the events of the day and the tension of this meeting, and I didn't have the stamina to continue arguing. Hamura gave me another melancholy smile. Listen, Naruto. You have a good heart. That has never altered in either your current or former lives. When the time comes, you will be the one to pick to save the planet. Nobody will do it for you. I didn't place you there to force my or anyone else's will on you. Sure doesn't feel like it. When I looked down at my cup, I saw that it was empty. The tea has been consumed. That implies I have to go now. I suppose. Hamura let out a sigh. Listen, Naruto, I only want the best for you. I honestly believe it. I can't explain why I'm acting the way I am right now, but I swear to you, I'll explain everything one day. I only wish my mother was here with me. That would have been enough for me to be content in this new life. As my spirit left Valoran and returned to my body, I said. Hamura observed as his apprentice returned to the mortal realm. However, she is with you, Naruto. I'm just amazed you haven't already recognized her. What exactly does he imply by the last line? Naruto awoke and sat up in his bed. The light was streaming through his window onto his face, and he was irritated that no one had closed his drapes. His eyes were closed as was his custom, and he was seeing through chaos. When he raised his palm to his face, he felt skin around his eyes rather than the blindfold. He'd grown so accustomed to it that his absence was immediately felt. It had to have been one of those two last night. As he flopped on his back, he reflected. I'm curious what they think of me now. His thoughts returned to the events of the previous night and the dream he just had. For the first time in his life, he was beginning to question his motives. He'd spent his entire life wishing to grow powerful enough to open a portal back to Earth and rejoin his mother. It had all looked so straightforward before. He owed nothing to this world, and he didn't even belong here. For God's sake, he would visit this universe on the screen of his phone simply for fun. In fact, it appears that the humans were not even gods. Being in the presence of a transcendental had taught him a few life lessons, since the guy disclosed knowledge to him that mortals were not allowed to know. Flashback. Hold on. Didn't you say you were a god? Hamura shook his head. I just simply went along with your understanding as you were having a bit of a mental crisis at the time. Well, thank you for being so considerate. Naruto had said cynically. So, what is a god then? Nothing that any of us can comprehend. Hamura said. Listen, Naruto, the more powerful a person becomes, the more they comprehend how the power hierarchy works. These beings who roam among inferior creatures consider themselves gods because they are just more powerful. The truth is that they are simply creations with more power than other beings. Hamura sighed and sat back in his chair. We are not gods, Naruto, and that is the truth. God is eternal and unlimited. He is neither made nor destroyed. He is greater than anything any of us can imagine. So God does exist. Of course, he said. And we all work in his palm of his hand. Everything occurs solely because he permits it. The plan does not spare any of us. Hamura placed his hand on his chest. Not even I. All who have gone before me have fallen, and despite my level of power, I am nothing in comparison to him. Only those who recognize this reality become powerful. It's just how things are. But did you not once say that you were omnipotent? To your comprehension, because that is what you can comprehend. However, omnipotence is incomprehensible. But only the Supreme One has true comprehension of true omnipotence. Even if I opposed his will, I would be rendered impotent. My point is, don't make the same mistake that so many others have. Do not consider yourself a god. There is only one. Let mortals think what they like, but don't lose sight of your place. I can't imagine many would be happy to hear that. Then they've chosen death. Do not fall into this trap. That's all I'm saying. They'd had many similar and foreboding chats during their time together. Naruto resented Hamura, but there was one thing he knew for certain about him. Hamura never lied. He kept things hidden, but he never lied. And he earned nothing from his deception. As a result, it had to be true. Naruto had to deal with the harsh realization that no matter how powerful he became, he could never truly be the master of his own fate. Because, like Hamura and everyone else, he was a part of creation. And now his own morality were being called into question. Could he abandon this universe if he understood that was how things were supposed to be? But, because this world had its own protagonist, they were safe, right? Naruto, on the other hand, was an unknown element, something that did not belong here. Did his presence make a difference? He had no idea how things would end in this universe because the story in his planet had not yet concluded when he died. Naruto pretended that he was quite fine to let this universe to its own devices, even if they were headed toward ruin. But as the Transcendental's words sunk in, he realized something. His heart was not on board. Naruto suffocated himself with a pillow and screamed into it. Why does everything have to be so complicated? Why was I put in this circumstance in the first place? Couldn't I have just died peacefully and gone to heaven? Heroes were not always what they appeared to be. Heroes were only heroes if others believed in them. That might possibly change at any time. Heroes served as a line of defense against powerful and crazy monsters. But who remained when the adversary was defeated? Humanity has always dreaded anything stronger than it and capable of posing a threat. Consider the stereotype of a hero and a demon ruler. Naruto had read that once the demon king was slain, the people began to dread the hero, but why? Because the hero was now the only one who could conceivably turn against them, and they couldn't protect against him because he had attained a comparable level of strength. And, granted, those bits were made up, but he was in a made-up universe right now. It has the potential to become a reality. And then there was the idea of heroes. Dragons are the typical antagonists in fantasy novels who terrorize people before being killed by someone who becomes a hero to the people. Half of the tales fail to mention that it was the people's fault in the first place. Everyone knows how dragons collect gold. But then some idiots decide to take the risks, sneak into the dragon's den, and steal some. So, what will the thing do? Just let them keep stealing? Or will it return the favor by going to those cretins' homes and stealing something from them? You don't grab the dragon's tail and expect nothing to happen. Literally. So, how did this world define a hero? Someone who defended against the dungeon's monsters. If he recalls correctly, it was the gods' fault that the dungeon began to stir in the first place. They were only entertaining themselves by having mortals clean up their messes. So why should he be a hero for a cause that was entirely their fault? In a world other than his own. Naruto noticed Excalibur leaning in a corner. When he called out to it, it flew into his hands. He sat back and watched it for a long, wondering for the first time about the true significance and meaning of this blade. He who is chosen by Excalibur is destined to become a hero, huh? He said it out loud. Naruto entered the breakfast room. It was later in the day, and there didn't appear to be many people remained at the supper table. All of the lower-level adventurers had left for their dungeon runs by this point, leaving only the executives and other higher-leveled adventurers. They didn't go to the dungeon as regularly because, at the time, they didn't make enough money to keep their equipment or progress in their stats because they could only do so in the deep floors. And in order to achieve such levels in the dungeon, one had to spend several weeks there in order to locate worthy challenges and pricey artifacts before being able to return. As a result, there are regular expeditions. Gareth was in the mess hall, finishing the last of his breakfast with the other two executives, just as Naruto had predicted. Naruto approached them quickly, and they glanced up to greet him. "There you are, lad," Gareth stated. "Had a good bit of sleep, did we?" "Yes. I'm all right." Naruto said this while wearing his regular blindfold. "Good morning, Captain, Reveria." He remarked this as he greeted the two people who returned his greetings. "Good morning, Naruto," Reveria explained. "Are you feeling better this morning?" "I'm fully healed up and ready to go back into the dungeon." Reveria just stood there staring at him. There was silence between the two until she comprehended and nodded. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you so much. I came to talk with you about something. You have? Finn inquired. About what exactly? I'd like a secondary weapon from the storehouse, please. The three elderly people exchanged puzzled expressions. What's wrong with your sword, lad? Gareth inquired. I'm not sure many of the things we have in there could match the quality of that blade. That is precisely why. Because I have such a keen sword, I feel that things have been too simple for me. I believe my combat skills would increase faster if I knew I possessed a non-unbreakable weapon. Gareth looked around for confirmation from the other two. The dwarf sighed as Finn nodded at him. All right, Naruto. Please accompany me. The dwarf stood up and motioned for Naruto to join him. Reveria followed the two as they walked away, her gaze fixed on the kid. She regrettably shook her head. Finn noticed this and comforted her. Reveria, he hasn't been here long. He'll open up eventually. All we have to do now is wait. She responded with a nod. Naruto and Gareth arrived at the storehouse's door, and the dwarf produced a set of keys. He heaved the heavy door open, inserting a rather large key into the lock, and a stifling odor emanated from the interior. Here you have it. Take a look around and decide what you want. Naruto thanked him and walked into the room. Looking around, he observed various crates of armor and weaponry strewn throughout, some of which were hung on the wall. There were also barrels covered with cloths and other materials, and he observed a few shelves with wine bottles on them. Scanning the crates, he sought for the one with the most recent-looking weaponry and made a beeline for it. It was largely swords, with a few daggers and axes thrown in for good measure. He combed among the swords, studying each one individually. They appeared worn and used, as he had expected, with several having chipped in their blades and rust where they met the crossguards. He didn't believe there was a complete barrier against moisture here. He continued to search till he found something at the very bottom. A longsword that was slightly longer than Lieber and felt strange on such a young boy. But his increased power smoothed out any faults in his fighting style with this blade, which felt light to him, barely heavier than a toothpick. It also appeared to be in excellent shape, with no signs of weathering on the blade. It appeared dull, but Naruto could simply polish it and put it through a whetting stone to get it back into fighting shape. He put all the others back and exited the warehouse after deciding on this weapon. Gareth whistled in approval as he went, his gaze fixed on the blade. That's a good one. I haven't seen that in a long time. Have you seen this before, Gareth? Naruto inquired. It used to be Noir's. Back when he wasn't wielding a spear, he'd use it to train us. Great times, great times. Gareth expressed his longing. Huh. That's a little unexpected, Naruto said while holding it. There was one more thing I wanted to ask you, Gareth. I'd like to work as an apprentice for a blacksmith anytime soon. Gareth puzzledly looked at him. Why would you want to do that? I have something I want to do in the future, a certain objective to accomplish that I can only reach under the guidance of a skilled blacksmith. And that would be, I want to make a weapon, one that nobody in Orario has ever seen. Gareth stared at him, puzzled, before wiping his chin and sighing. Well, in all honesty, even though we are an exploration-type familia, it isn't that unusual for someone to do that. Still, everyone I know who is good would expect you to have a rudimentary understanding of blacksmithing before even considering hiring you. I do have some experience. You do? Yes. Before I arrived here, I received some guidance. I even have my works to prove it. Gareth shook his head as he shut the door to the storage. I suppose that's all right. What kind of weapon are you trying to make? Naruto paused for a bit. Think of it like a magic sword. But a little different. Different as in how? It doesn't use magic in the traditional sense. It also has a variety of additional applications. Well, you'd have to go an apprentice under someone pretty skilled, even in the Hephaestus familia, for anything to do with magic weapons. Fortunately, I know someone, although there are no assurances that she will take you on. She is, after all, incredibly busy. I'll send her a letter and see what she says. Could you please tell her that I have some pieces of created which I would like to show her to prove my experience? Naruto did, in fact, undergo smithing instruction while in Valoran. He'd been taught a little bit of everything so he could pick something to do when he wasn't in the dungeon. He couldn't be expected to fight all the time in there. Outside of it, adventurers had lives. Sure. I'll do it. If you want to go to the dungeon, you need hurry up. You've already missed breakfast. Naruto murmured as he walked away, "Thank you, Gareth." A half hour later, he was on the dungeon's first floor, watching as the walls let out a few goblins. Naruto inhaled deeply as he relaxed his muscles and grabbed the new sword, which gleamed like new. It wasn't as gleaming as Excalibur, but Naruto didn't want to think about that blade right now. Naruto's pupils constricted as the sword writhed in the flames of his elemental magic. With all that had been on his mind lately, he needed to blow off some steam, and a few poor monsters would become the target of his rage. To be continued.
That's it for this podcast. Thanks for listening to this video. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, like, share, and subscribe for more. And thank you all for happy support and have a great day.